All set. All right, welcome everybody to 52 Living Ideas. I am really grateful to Greg for doing this. His book, his and Massimo's book, The Handbook for New Stoics, is the best resource I've found of doing, yes, Dave, thank you for holding it up. It's the best resource I've found to kind of systematically integrate Stoicism into your life. I know this group in Philadelphia with Bill, Joe, several other people have been working at it, and I'm actually partnering with them. So they're going to be hosting some of these sessions. So what we're doing is that Greg has graciously agreed to do 6 of the sessions and give us guidance for what else we should do while when he's not here. So we have a full program of 13 weeks to do this. So I'm very excited and I'm very grateful to Greg for this. And I'm glad to see you all folks here. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Greg. Greg, take it away.
Thanks, Shrikant. So actually, I was doing an informal poll in chat before we started, seeing if enough people did the first week's exercise. And I don't have enough data to really know for sure, but I think it may be worth it to start off by actually going straight into the split off rooms to have discussion, if that's okay with you, Shrikant.
Sure.
That way, people can discuss how they did for week 1, because week 1 feeds directly into week 2. So it is semi-important to have done the first week. Not all exercises are like that. Some exercises riff off of each other, but week 1 and week 2 are quite strongly integrated. So what I suggest is that we start off that way. And if you didn't actually do week 1's exercise, then I suggest just listening, and if you guys have extra time after discussing between you what you guys did, then you could maybe try to explain week 1's exercise to the people who haven't done it and have them explain it back so they have a basic idea. And maybe you could use the vignette that starts off week 1 with Alice in order to try to go through Alice's situation and see what's under her complete control and what is not, and actually try to suss through that if enough of you in your group haven't done that. So that way people who have done the exercise and haven't done the exercise have something to do when we split off. So that being said, I'll hand over the controls to Shrikant, and we can maybe do a split off mini chat sessions before beginning. Then I think we'll come back together, have Q&A or comments about week 1, and then move into week 2's material.
Perfect. I love it. Greg, it's going to take me about a couple of minutes to set it up. Could you give an overview of the first week's exercise to those, especially for those who have not done this, so they kind of get a good kind of orienting way to start before they jump directly in? About just a 2-minute overview. Please go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So week 1's exercise was to explore what is in your complete control and what is not in your complete control. And I think it was pretty straightforward for the most part. The goal was every day, look back over your day and find one specific event that occurred, something that had some emotional salience. It could be positive or negative, although it's often easier to start with negative emotions stuff you were worried about, stuff you were sad about, stuff you were angry about. But it could also be desire or things you're obsessed with, although I tend to suggest people work with desire a little bit later, since there's a little more resistance and it may be a little harder to work with, because a lot of people like desiring things, whereas few people like these states that feel bad. So so the goal of last week's exercise was once a day, like review your previous day, find an event that happened with some kind of emotional salience, probably negative, and then split it up into segments of what's under your complete 100% control and what is not. And just separate out the components of that event into those 2 bins. And this is meant to give you some practice in order to try to determine for yourself whether Epictetus's claim that just certain part of our mental states are within our control and everything else is outside of it. It's one thing to hear that. It's another to actually examine your own life and see whether it's true for yourself. Plus, there is the chance that you actually may disagree with Epictetus, at least in some of the details. And by going over events that happened in your life specifically, you'll get to see for yourself what wording and what actually rings true to your experience, so you could carry that forward to the rest of the exercises. So that was week one's exercise in a nutshell.
Wonderful. Thank you, Greg. Okay, I'm starting the breakout rooms now. Folks, even if you're new, please, there are going to be lots of friendly people in the room who will be happy to explain all of this in detail to you. And we will be back here in 20 minutes, automatically back in this room to discuss everything further. I'm opening the rooms now. Is here. All right, welcome back, everybody. So, Greg, take it away.
Oh, okay. So I want to open the floor to questions and comments about week one specifically. So now that you've had a chance to discuss it, let's just chat about it. So Shrikant can let you know what the details are in terms of raising your hand and all of that, raising your virtual hand.
Sure. Okay, folks. So we've been doing this for 4 years, and we've got 4 simple rules that work really well to make possible complex discussion, complex and productive discussion. So first one is raise your hand when you want to speak. The way you raise your hand here is you can type exclamation mark in your chat, or raise your hand in Zoom, or you can type a question starting with an exclamation mark. So I know it's a question for the presenter. So that's number 1. Number 2, keep on topic. Today right now we are doing a wrap up of the first week. When the next round of questions comes up, there will be a different goal. Keep focused on that. Number 3, be brief. There's a lot of people who have lots of interesting things to say and ask about. We want to get to as many as possible. And number 4, be courteous. Feel free to disagree with anything, but do so courteously. So it's going to be, I think, iPad second girl. That's Leslie, followed by Joe. Leslie, go ahead.
Thanks. My question comes from page 16 of your handbook, and it's in the chart, the bottom row, dealing with how much control we have over our emotions, and it seems like we almost have no control over what emotions initially flare up in us. We're afraid, we're insulted, we feel threatened. That there's some control we have afterward over how we contemplate and evaluate and analyze the emotion. But could you talk more about really how little control we have over those gut emotions? They just are what they are?
Yep, I can. So I'll talk from the ancient Stoic perspective, since I think it's important to kind of say what the ancient Stoics thought, although a lot of it would need to be modified in light of modern science as well. But the ancient Stoics actually did hold that those initial gut, you can call them gut emotions, those initial stirrings really aren't under your control. They would put those things under the category of impressions, our first impressions about things. So our first impressions about things, such as initial feelings, what modern scientists, cognitive scientists may call valence, whether something is just generally feeling good or generally feeling bad, those kinds of things are not under control. Even initial automatic thoughts like saying that asshole, or what are they doing, getting angry, or ooh, I want that. Or if you stub your toe, the various curse words that come out, that's actually not under your control. It's then catching that and realizing how to work with that, which ultimately is. So there are a subset. So the Stoics actually did want to eliminate certain emotions, but they are a subset of emotions. They're emotions that well up a lot, push reason to the side. But a lot of things that we do call emotions nowadays, things from our initial reactions, our first flares of anger, our first automatic thoughts, those are not under our control, even in the ancient Stoic practice. Also, the ancient Stoics had their own version of mental illness. They called it melancholia. They literally thought it was too much black bile, but they did acknowledge that you can't control. Sometimes there's something chemically or physically wrong with the mind. So also those things that are related to what we would nowadays possibly classify as mental illness is not under control either. And so, yeah, so a lot of things that we would call emotion are not under control, but we want to practice slowly to work with those initial reactions and to recognize them for what they are. That's the foundations of Stoic practice, not controlling those initial reactions, because ultimately we can't that much.
Okay, it's going to be Joe followed by Alex. Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, mine is more just a comment, is that, what I've recognized specifically with this exercise that it's helped a lot with is the release of stress, because it directs your energy towards things that you can actually take action on. And once you're able to take action, you're actually focusing on addressing the problem at hand. So the big takeaway that I had from this is the idea that how well intentionally writing it down obviously is really kind of key too. But the ability that it has to release stress in one's life, it's almost like a release of endorphins. So anyway, thank you. I just wanted to make the comment.
Thank you, Joe. Next up is Alex, followed by Shelley. Alex Garrett, go ahead.
Hello, Greg and Shikran. Thanks for doing this today. So the initial reaction, and I feel like there's almost like a split second, then we actually react. So
Sorry, can you talk loud?
To...
I can't hear.
Sure. How about now? Can you hear me now?
Yes. Just speak more into the mic. Go ahead.
Okay, I changed my microphone a little bit. Anyway, the initial reaction and then our actual reaction coming out into the world, like how we text someone. What's your advice for that split second where we want to react? How do we pull back on that initial reaction and think about it more?
So my initial advice is, if you're an early practicing Stoic, to not worry about it and to focus more on intentional exercises set at a specific time. If you notice, for the first 2/3 of the book, that's actually what we do, and we do it for a reason. That split second reaction is harder, and if you don't have the fundamentals down, you may have less success and get frustrated with that. But the entire third section of the book, the discipline of assent, is about that split second. So if you are not a well-practiced Stoic or feel that you have some more work to do just in desire and action, I would say don't sweat it for now. That comes later.
Thank you very much.
Shelley, you're next.
I think that kind of answered what my question was, because I know, like, years ago, I had a particular reaction to an event, and I began to take practice, like I would lose my temper really quickly with my kids or something like that. And so when I felt that coming up, I literally would send my own self to a timeout because I wanted to stop reacting quickly to them. I wanted to remain calm. And over time now, that's what I do. It's rare that I ever overreact with my kids anymore. Now, that's taken years of practicing that, but I almost felt like you were saying, and I'm sure I misunderstood you, that we can't get control over that. And maybe it's that spark of initial response we can't, but I've seen in my own self, as I've practiced consistently over time, I have gotten control in how I respond. Am I on the right track there, or did I misunderstand you? Or I'd love for you to expound on that a little bit more.
Sure. I think maybe there's like a 25% misunderstanding, but I think it's mostly right. So yes, if you're able to get control more quickly over time, that's probably because of practice, because you're able to insert your cognition into the process, so it's not so automatic. And then that sort of becomes the new, more healthy automatic with time, because you become so well rehearsed at it. So in a sense, you can control that split second. And furthermore, I forget where it is. I know Seneca said it, and I think it's on anger, but don't quote me on that. I do know that Seneca mentions that these initial reactions that we have may decrease over time if we practice, but I de-emphasize them because they're not under our complete control, the initial reactions. And so this would be, and some modern cognitive psychology, I think, supports this, especially with like behavior. Well, that's not modern anymore, but like some versions of behaviorism, where you have an extinction, where if you expose yourself to something repeatedly, the initial reaction will go down with time. That's the basis of things like exposure therapies. So it will go down with time, those initial reactions, but for Stoic practice, the focus is not to control those initial reactions, because ultimately they're not. You can influence them, but again, since they're not under your complete control, you may get frustrated when they still come up, and that leads to an actual negative cycle. So it's usually more fruitful to focus on what's under your complete, or if you don't believe there are things that are under your complete control, as close to complete control as possible. And those tend to be like automatic thoughts, your intents to act, and what your aims are, what your desires and aversions are, what you're aiming to get in life and what you're aiming to avoid in life. And focusing on those things and not the initial reactions that come up. You may curse out other people or get angry initially for years years, it may never go away, and that's because it's not under your complete control. Or it could fade with time, but the point of the practice is not to focus on that, but to focus on what you could do with whatever comes up.
Okay, Greg, shall we go to week 2 now?
Okay, so we shall go to week 2. So yeah, so week 2 is one of the exercises that feeds directly from week 1. And although I can't be available for going through all of the practices of the book, I wanted to be here for this one because it fed into week 1. And also because week 1 feeds into it, but also because it is one of the major mistakes we made when writing the book. Well, I mean, I like playing a game and seeing whether people can tell which sections I wrote and which sections Massimo wrote, because Massimo has a lot of a bigger voice in the world, and so people who read a lot of his stuff may be familiar with his writing. So it's always a fun game to kind of guess which one it is, because we actually broke up the division of the book in a specific way. But since I have to admit fault, I want to ameliorate Massimo of any blame. I messed up in writing this this exercise, in my view. I've gotten a lot of feedback that it's not clear. So if there's another edition of the book, I'm going to rewrite it to make it clearer. And it's a shame that I didn't write it too well to be clear, because it's one of the most important exercises in the discipline of desire. So another reason why I wanted to come here is to kind of like explain it and answer any questions that arise because of it. So the goal is pretty straightforward from week 2. So the goal is to take a look at your week 1 exercises to see what came up and what you found to be under complete control and what you found to not be under complete control. And then to practice focusing on what you can control for the rest of the week. Each morning you wake up and take a look at your list and say, oh, well, I tend to be angry at people's behaviors, which is not under my complete control, but me dwelling on their actions, me constantly telling myself stories, I could cut that off if I want to. That's under my control.
Sorry, folks, my mistake. It was a technical error. I tried to set up the next level of breakout groups and it launched off by mistake, my mistake. Sorry about that. Folks, I apologize for the technical error. I was trying to set up the next group. Sorry, Greg.
That's okay.
Let's give another 60 seconds for people to come back in. I was just trying to set up things for the next time to make sure that we save time, but I ended up launching it by mistake. Sorry about that.
So even if you think you're in control, sometimes it's not in your control.
No, this was definitely my error. This is completely under my control and I screwed up.
Yeah, that was a test and I'm pissed. No.
Good. Let's see, we got 45 seconds. $30. Don't worry, Greg. I'm going to cut this part out of the video so it won't be there on YouTube.
Okay.
All right, everybody's back. Go ahead, Greg. Folks, I apologize. I was trying to set up the breakout rooms in advance so I would save time, but I launched them by mistake. So I apologize to everyone, especially Greg. Greg, please take it away.
Sure. So what I was saying is that the week 2's goal is to just intentionally try to focus on what's under your complete control and try to ignore what's not under your complete control. And you start each day out by thinking about like, what's in my day and what do I tend to get upset about? And I'm going to focus on what's in my control rather than not. And that's all that's going on there. So the fancy way that Epictetus puts this is that it's you transfer your aversions from what's not under your control to what is under your control. That means instead of worrying about outcomes and things that happen in the world, you worry about your own reactions and what you can control. That's what the goal of week 2 is. So there's a step-by-step guide in the book, and the bit of feedback that I've gotten from other people is that when they read it, they were confused by the instructions, but actually once they started writing down and following the step-by-step guide, then it became clear for them. So if you have the book and you want to do the exercise as it's written there, I suggest you go through it step by step and actually do the writing, because that clarified it for a lot of people. So that's basically week 2. What you're going to do is transfer your aversions from externals to internals. The exercise starts off by you kind of going back over your previous week. You would probably be doing it tomorrow if you're doing a week by week. You'd start on Sunday. You'd look back over week 1 and look for patterns in what you tended to get upset over from the previous week. So you'd say, hey, I tend to get angry, or hey, I tend to get worried, or and I get worried in these specific circumstances. Then you've learned something about yourself, and then you could focus on trying to worry less about the external thing and worry more about what you're telling yourself or your intent to act. There are a couple of examples in the vignette of week 2 that go over it. There's one example in the vignette, and there's also one example that is that's gone over in the introduction. So 2 examples of this. The vignette starts with Suki, who is worried about an upcoming medical test that she's going to get. And so Stoic theory suggests that if you are worried about something, you are by definition, you have to be focused on something that's external to yourself. That's the only way worry arises. So if you find yourself worrying about something, that is an excellent clue that you're focused on something outside of your control. So in the case of Suki, instead of worrying about the results of the test, she could instead worry about why she's currently dwelling on it. She could say, my thoughts about this are under my complete control. So I could do 2 things here. I could maybe write out to myself that I don't know the results of the test. That's why I'm going to go to the doctor's office in order to get the results. Otherwise, I would be psychic and I wouldn't need to go to the doctor in the first place. Okay, so I don't know the results, so why am I focused on the necessarily worst outcome? So why not just wait until the test results are available? There's nothing else I can do, and sitting here and dwelling on it is going to help. So that's one thing Suki can do. That is transferring her aversion from an external to an internal. She is averse to the test results. That's outside of her control. Instead, she becomes averse to her thought patterns and then can change them since they're under her complete control. And it's interesting because you could frame Marcus Aurelius's meditations as an exercise, pretty much like 80% of it is like this exercise. Marcus Aurelius was sitting down and journaling to himself, trying to convince himself to focus more on his internal thoughts and behaviors that were under his control, and to not worry so much about what was external to him. So read from that light, like Marcus Aurelius's meditations was largely an exercise in exactly week 2. And that's something that you can take put in your pocket if you think it would be useful for week 2 as well. You can journal to yourself to try to convince yourself not to worry about the external, but instead focus on your intentions to act, your thoughts that go on in your mind, and what you want out of life or want to avoid in life. Those are the 4 things that Epictetus said were under our complete control. So by trying to journal to yourself, you could try to convince yourself of this. And that's one way you could actually implement week 2, is every morning journal to yourself saying, I'm worried about this upcoming meeting, or I'm worried about my child's performance at school, or I'm worried about this medical result. But instead, try to journal to yourself and remind yourself that that's not under your control, but other things are. So that's one example of how to transfer your aversions and how to practice week 2. Another example is given in the description for week 2, and it's just job performance, a simple example of being worried about how you're performing at your job. That's an external, and so if you're anxious about job performance, that by definition, or the Stoics would say that by definition, you must be concerned with something external to yourself. You wouldn't be worried if you had complete control over it. So again, worry is a great clue that you're focusing on something outside of your control. And instead of focusing on the outcome of the job performance or job review, you could instead simply focus on your intention to act, to intend to put as much time as possible into the job, or to intend to improve your performance in specific ways. That intention is under your complete control. The outcome is not under your complete control. And so by removing your focus on the outcome to your intentions to act, you can also alleviate some of that anxiety. And so the goal of week 2 is to practice every day, look ahead at your day and say, what's coming up that I'm worried about, or that I'm anxious about, or that I'm sad about? If you see something that's coming up and you feel negatively about it, it's probably because it's beyond your control. Your goal is to then sit down and think about how you could focus more on what's in your control and what would that would look like for that specific instance. And you do that every day of the week for the rest of the week with a bunch of prep work on Sunday. So you sit down and look at week 1 and say, what are my patterns? Do I tend to be angry? Do I tend to be sad? Do I tend to be anxious? And then put that in your pocket and take it with you for each day for the rest of the week. So that's week 2 in a nutshell. And I do want to point out just one interesting part of Stoic theory that week 2 answers, and it's based on a common question that was brought up in week 1. So week 1 talked about the dichotomy of control and what's completely under your control and what's not. And in week 1, we mentioned that we would be answering this, the question of things that you could influence, things that are like 60% of your control. Are there such things? And this week answers with yes, there are such things, but they can always be decomposed into things that are not under your complete control and under your complete control. In every circumstance you look at, you could try to break it down further. For the mathematically inclined, there's like, these are like orthogonal basis vectors. So like, you could always break, if you think something's under your control, you can, like partially under your control, you could still break it down further into complete control and not complete control. And so this is brought up in the explanation for week 2. And the example is, again, job performance. And so if you are the type of person who tries to focus their time in such a way that they perform well at their job, there is a correlation between people who are like that and actual job performance. But it's just that, it's a correlation. It's not going to be 100%. And so you can break job performance down into the amount of effort that you give it. And also there maybe if there is such a thing as an innate talent, which is kind of an empirical question, like that's not under your control anymore. If there's like innate talent, and I'm leaving that aside as to whether there is or not, but supposing there is and that's not under your complete control, then you would put that to the side because you have no influence on it. But you could focus on practice, efficient ways of working, maybe getting rid of obstacles that are getting in the way of your performance, working on those things, intending to work on those things. The outcome, again, is not under your complete control, but your intention to work on those things is. And so that's how the Stoics kind of handle this middle gray area. They don't say like you can't influence anything, but what you can influence always comes from your intentions to action, your cognitions, and what you want and want to avoid in life, according to Stoic theory. So focus on those things that are under your complete control, and you may influence the outcomes, but you'll never completely control them. So with that being said, I wanted to open it up to questions about the exercise as well as possibly the theory about control at this point. So we shall open the floor at this point.
Okay. If you have a question, you can go ahead and raise your hand in Zoom or type exclamation mark in chat. Go right ahead. So starts with Leslie. Leslie, go ahead.
Yes, this is, I think this concept, and let me know if you agree, I think this relates to denial a little bit, because I had pets that died in the past, and I was like bargaining with the universe for bring my animal back. And the last couple of years I had a family member die and an animal die, and I was much more accepting. I was still in deep grief, but I was more accepting. This is what it is, and I can't control it. This person's in a coma. This person is going to die. And And it was the lack of denial that I think allowed me to experience what was still honestly rather beautiful in spending the last 3 days with someone in a coma. But I think I think the lack of denial is related to this Stoicism concept of just accepting what I could not control. This person was in a coma and dying, but I could control sitting there, being with her, talking to her. What do you think?
I think that's an excellent example. And yeah, that is an example of this week 2 in action. If one intentionally tried to practice that, if you found yourself being upset by by the person's coma, that is a clue that you're focusing on things outside of your control. But then the realization is that you can focus on your behavior, trying to possibly be there, be helpful, be an advocate, or simply spend time with other friends and family members as well. Those things are more in your control. So yeah, I think that's a great example.
Next question is from Roger. Roger, go ahead.
I didn't know I was the next person already. So yeah, my question is, I was looking at the chapter 1, and you talked about things like the intent to show up on time, or the wish to meet by quota. It's one of the things that seemed a little, seemed kind of soft. So I was wondering if there's an aspect that talks about, well, you can wish these things, but you also need to like actually attempt to execute it. It seems like that should be part of it. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that it is. Yeah, I think that is an important part of it. The actual execution is not under one's complete control, and also, if like some aspects of the mentality are not under one's complete control, like remembering to execute it, like memory is not under one's complete control either. So I think as like a good first, second, third step, yeah, a plan to execute would be an important part. If you fail to execute, it may be useful to troubleshoot why, but I would not suggest beating yourself up over it because it was under your complete control and you failed. So that's one of the reasons why we focus on such a narrow thing such as intention, because that's really all you can do at the end of the day. And a lot of like failures in Stoic practice really come down to just simply not remembering. Memory is a tough thing, and memory isn't in one's complete control. And a lot of the goal of repeatedly doing Stoic practice and showing up to Stoic meetups and stuff like that is just to put it more in the forefront of your mind, and that does quite a bit on its own.
Great, thank you.
Next up is Jeff. Jeff, go ahead.
Yes, hi. So I had heard another Stoic teacher use the line that if it's not under my control, then it's nothing to me. Does that sound like basically the gist of one of the points that you're getting at here?
It sort of is. At this point, the main goal is to actually focus more on what you can control rather than pushing the thing that you can't control off to the side. If you want to say it's nothing to you and that helps you reduce your focus on the thing outside your control, then go ahead, but I don't think that's necessary at this point. That kind of stuff specifically falls a little more under the discipline of assent and what you say to impressions. And also that phrase, there's actually an essay in my back pocket to explicate that phrase because I think it's really grossly misunderstood. Something being nothing to you doesn't mean meh, whatever. Doesn't matter. I think Epictetus, who's the person who says that, means that literally. They think that the part of your mind that's under your complete control is you. That is really who you are. Nothing else is. The parts of your mind that aren't under your complete control, the flesh, the body, that's not you. What's you is this little tiny part of your mind. So when you say it is nothing to me, you're literally saying it is outside of that little tiny part of my mind that's under my complete control. It's not saying meh, doesn't matter, whatever, screw it. Because a lot of people are quite averse to that, and for a decent reason. And I actually don't think that's what Epictetus is fully saying. He's not saying don't care about it at all. He's saying it's nothing to me means that it's not under your complete control. It is not essential to you and who you are as a human being in person.
Okay, next up is Joe.
One really quick question is the idea that, what is not in your control, but the question of justice as well. So then, like, what if something that is not in your control is unjust, right? Then what is in your control is like, how do you react to that? So then is it that you tend to, it's a balance between almost, I feel like you're trying to, between a idea of almost like irrational reaction towards something that you're trying to correct, and something that actually you should probably just let go. And I think that that's the transition that I'm having I struggle with sometimes, is that, you know, is the idea of justice and how that figures into this, you know, to this exercise.
My response to that will be a non-response, which may disappoint you. So since we're focused on practice, and specifically the 3 disciplines practice of Epictetus, the 3 disciplines are actually tiered in structure. Epictetus is quite clear that he recommends starting with the discipline of desire, drilling it and getting pretty good at it, then moving to the discipline of action. And he says the reason why. If you don't have your passions in control to a decent degree, you will not be effectual in helping other people and being just. And so my answer, it's a non-answer. We are currently working on the discipline of desire. I have no idea where you are in that. If you feel that like you have things like anger, anxiety, depression, sadness, strong emotions, or other things like strong desires and lust and things like that, it is important to drill and work on those till those are reduced to a significant extent before jumping into practicing justice. But it's extremely important to do so, but that's the goal of the discipline of action. So I would say at least wait a few weeks until we get there, and I would put that off for now. So I'll avoid the question. Sorry.
No, I want to thank you for that, because you mentioned that last week, how many people in your Stoics group want to go right to the discipline of action. So that is actually clarification. So your non-answer was very helpful.
Yay. Thank you.
Thank you. Even your non-answers are very helpful, Greg. So that's very impressive. All right. So now we're going to, Greg, you want to do breakout rooms now?
Yep. I think the next step is for breakout rooms. And so I suggest what you guys do is start maybe planning for your week 2 practice. You could do this in a few ways: reviewing week 1, or take a look at, see what your patterns are, and see if you could come up with a plan for what you'd like to do in week 2. It could be more than one plan, because you may have more than one issue you want to tackle, and maybe each day specific issues will arise. Maybe during the weekdays you'll have anxieties about work, and maybe on the weekends you'll have anger about family issues or something like that. In which case you can actually switch up your focus. But the main goal is to try to stop focusing, or focus less on what's outside of your control, and focus more on what's in your control. So that's the main theme to discuss in your breakout sessions, to see if you could actually come up with an action plan that you could carry forward for the week in terms of how you're going to do that. What are the specific steps?
All right. So I'm going to open up the breakout rooms again for 20 minutes. And in 20 minutes, we'll be back here again. Opening up the breakout rooms now.